Ole, Light on Conspiracies is becoming famous for international panels, and today is no different. We have assembled some of our all-time favorite participants. We're joined today by Willem Felderhof and Cody Snodgres. Gentlemen, how you doing?
Doing great.
Yeah, same here. Doing absolutely great.
Ole?
Yep, doing great here as well. The reason I wanted to invite Willem, and I'm really grateful that you could come on, is because instead of me guessing or us guessing about different stuff, it's so of such a value to get inside information from people who really know what they're talking about. In this case, flying. And I know you've been a commercial pilot for almost 25 years, I believe. And also you were a flying instructor as well at the time of 9/11. So this is why I would really like to hear your point of view around these things, the alleged flight planes and the whole shebang.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So we're going to focus on that today. Willem, for people who haven't seen you before, you have dedicated so much of your time to exposing aerotoxic syndrome. And we've done some shows on that. It's absolutely stunning information that you've brought forward. Obviously, the aviation industry has changed tremendously, but what we want to focus on today is this flight path. Do we want to talk, Ole, specifically about the World Trade Center? Because I know that's sort of the most, photographed incident in terms of actually seeing images of the planes. And we were having a discussion last week about some people's feelings that the video images we've seen of this have been computer-generated images using visual effects, and that part of the evidence that supports that theory is what many pilots have described as the impossible nature of the flight characteristics described that day. Is that right?
Who did you ask?
Well, I'm just saying that's what we want to talk about because. So Willem,
can you still?
Yeah.
It seems like. Can you still hear us, Willem?
Yeah. Okay. I'm back. Sorry about that.
No problem. So what we want to talk about specifically, Willem, is this the flight path. Let's start, shall we, with is it Flight 77 that hit the South Tower of the World Trade Center, alleged to be United Airlines commercial plane, smacked right into the center of the South Tower?
That's correct. I mean, all the four cases. Well, you can see the different cases, analyze the different cases from different perspective. The flight path, specifically the flight path from Flight 175 into the Pentagon, is most interesting from a flight technical perspective, because that's just really just completely impossible, in my view, that these so-called hijackers have operated this, hijacked this plane and then did this maneuver on the Pentagon. But the flight path of the other planes which hit the World Trade Center towers were technically possible, but there were other aspects which were flight technically and flight operationally impossible. But the flight path by itself would be possible to make by plane, but there were other there was other data which was presented as true officially, which were, for instance, the speeds which by which these planes would have carried out these maneuvers. These speeds which were propagated are impossible flight technically to operate these planes with these speeds and with the G-forces which come with that by operating with these speeds on these altitudes. But the flight path specifically is especially with Flight 175 on the Pentagon, which is very interesting, because that's an almost impossible maneuver to do, especially by somebody who doesn't have any experience of operating a big commercial airliner. That's just a ridiculous notion in my view.
Yeah.
But Willem, you were a flight instructor at the time. Is that correct?
Yeah, I was at that moment, 2001. I was operating as a pilot on the MD-11. So that's a big commercial airliner. It's in the same segment as the Boeing 747, and I was flying at least 2 times per month in Northeast sector to Washington, New York, or Boston from Amsterdam. At the same time, I was an instructor and an inspector on these flights. So I was training new pilots on these routes. So I was very familiar with the operating procedures, emergency procedures in this sector, and the flight technical aspects, because I was also an instructor on the flight simulator, where we simulated. I was actually writing scenarios of hijackings myself as an instructor, which were then done by all the cockpit crew and as training scenarios. So I was very aware of the operating procedures, emergency operating procedures, interception procedures, hijacking protocols specifically in that sector at that moment.
Mm-hmm. Well, so what I'd like to do, Willem, because most people know we are doing a sponsor exclusive show each Monday. So here during this portion of the show on YouTube and Facebook, and Ole, I apologize, it's not running on your Facebook channel right now. In the confusion, I forgot to set that, but we'll get it on there afterwards. People are going to be able to see the sponsor exclusive segment that's starting in just 20 minutes on patreon.com/lightonconspiracies, as well as subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth and patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. And we're going to get into some detail there. One of the biggest problems that I find for people who want to find the truth of 9/11 is that there's this conflation of all of the events into one thing. Like right now, we're asking specifically about flight speeds, radar data. We've mentioned the Pentagon. We're talking about the South Tower of the World Trade Center. And the people in the comments are saying that there was no plane wreckage in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. We know that, but these are all separate events. And one of the things that we got into talking about last week that there was some disagreement about is this notion of exactly what happened at the World Trade Center. And I'd like to cover each of these events specifically with your vast knowledge as an airline pilot and all of this sort of wargaming about hijacking. That's going to be fascinating. But I think it's important that we break it out into individual pieces so that people can kind of understand that. My feeling is aircraft did hit the World Trade Center, but I do not believe that that means that that aircraft strike caused the collapse. I do not believe that that means that an aircraft hit the Pentagon, and I do not believe that that means an aircraft crashed in the field in Shanksville. So I kind of want to go through these things one at a time, and if you guys don't mind, I'd like to speak specifically about the South Tower of the World Trade Center and the official story's allegation that it was hit by a United Airlines 767, and my assertion that it was in fact a military KC-46 that could have undergone extensive modifications that we would have no idea about. Can you address that?
Well, I find it very difficult to speculate on what did happen actually on these days. I can only say for sure that the official narrative with the official NIST report and the official 9/11 report, which was presented to the public of what happened there, is just flight technically and flight operationally impossible. That's for me the most I can say with 100% sure, with certainty. Other than what did happen actually, I have my personal ideas about things which are sort of aligned with what you just said on what flew into the trade centers and in the Pentagon and what happened in Shanksville from my experience. But I mostly stick to the official story, and that I can, from my experience and knowledge, and also with the amazing research and analysis which was being done by pilots for 9/11 Truth, who have been analyzing all the separate cases from a flight technical and operational standpoint, which show with evidence and all information that the official story is just complete nonsense.
Right.
But what did happen, it's always difficult and speculation. So I think the most relevant thing is, because it's also a continuation of speculation and talking, and then we sort of don't stick to the essence, which is that the official story is just nonsense. And so that's the most important thing, actually. But what did really happen is always speculation. So
Sure.
I can give my thoughts on that. But
well, let's
Willem,
start with the impossibilities that you've quoted. You're saying there are certain things about it that were impossible. That would be the best place to start.
Yes. Well, there are numerous different aspects in the official report which don't make any sense flight operationally and flight technically. For instance, the idea that 4 airplanes just can fly around in the northeast sector, which I have also always been amazed with amazing and respect saw how the American air traffic control dealt with all this high dense air traffic there without any problems, actually. Very professional. They had a clean record of interceptions and planes which did flew into this sector by accident with wrong navigation. But I mean, if you don't answer maximum, sorry, you don't hear me anymore?
No, we lost you, Jason. I can hear Willem, but not you. Okay, yeah, okay. Let's just continue, Willem.
Okay, well, so the idea that these planes can fly around in this most advanced, most protected, most dense, one of the most dense air traffic airspaces without being intercepted is just from a flight operational standpoint, impossible unless there is some inside help or assistance with this, because what I say, if you don't, these planes fly around there with just fixed protocols. So if you don't answer a radio call within 3 minutes on the ground, air traffic control is going to connect NORAD, and then the Pentagon is on the line when you don't answer a radio call for 7 minutes. And if there's then an official hijacking, then all the emergency protocols will start through a fixed protocol, which don't fail there, especially in this northeast sector. This is a highly professional people in all the layers they are working. So the notion that nothing happens and these planes can fly around, especially when already planes hit supposedly the Twin Towers, and we're still able to just continue to fly through this airspace, and also to penetrate Class B airspaces, which is the Washington area, the White House, are even restricted airspace. They're restricted airspace, but even more, especially if there's hijacking, they are closed. So you will be shut down, literally. It's on a war status. So that's just ridiculous, and that's possible, and especially by people who didn't have any experience of flying in big airliners under these stress. I mean, the amount of stress of operating these planes without any experience is just unimaginable, because the cockpit warnings, oral warnings, and visual warnings are off the scale if you operate by these speeds only. And that is these warnings are made in such a way that it creates stress. So you're being triggered to react on these warnings. So the stress level, and then
you mean in the cockpit warnings, the shakers and buzzers and all that stuff?
Yeah, they are made in such a way that you're being put on alert. So it creates stress in a certain way. So, but because then you respond, you see it and you notice it, and you will respond to take action. So you cannot fly around with these. All these warnings, but also in this space, and don't have any experience. That's just a ridiculous idea, actually. I've trained pilots who came from the aviation school on their first flight. So they came, they came on the type of aircraft where I was flying on, but they came as a second officer, so they were not allowed to land or to take off. They were only like relief pilots to get familiar with the overwhelming overload of information, data. It's if you take a seat in the cockpit like that, it's very overwhelming and intimidating. So these new pilots, who were very good pilots because they were selected actually, and they had a quite high standard, but still the transition to a big commercial airliner from a single engine and just small twin engines is just too big to handle. Therefore, they were just relief pilots for 2-3 years. And here is the official story is being put out that people who were not able to fly a single engine Cessna even hijack these big airplanes, which is just, well, that's just a ludicrous idea, impossible idea for different reasons, what I just stated.
That's occurred to me because sorry, Ole, but when you look at the cockpit of a Cessna like this versus the cockpit of a Boeing 767, it seems to me that it's sort of like saying, well, you know, my grandmother can drive a Buick with a automatic transmission, so she should be able to enter the Indy 500 and operate a race car and win.
Yeah, it's sort of the same. It's the same idea, and we actually try to simulate these maneuvers in the flight simulator. Like that was like 2 years, I think, after 9/11. After these things, we were sitting in the simulator, flight simulators, and we tried to do the maneuvers which were presented to us as being the official narrative with instructors. So we were like with 5 or 6 instructors, all pilots who really know how to handle these big airliners, and we tried to do the maneuvers also on the World Trade Center with high speeds, which from the start you already have to override the flight simulator because it doesn't operate, because the speeds that were presented to us by which these planes supposedly had hit the Twin Towers were outside the operating flight envelope. So you cannot operate there. So the flight simulator is just crashing or just doesn't start. It's fixed. So you had to override the flight simulator already from the beginning to try to fly these planes with these speeds. And then it also was just very, very difficult to hit these towers with these planes with these high maximum speed on these altitudes, because it's very difficult to operate these big airliners on high speed. You really have to fly it with your fingertips because the G-forces with these high speeds on this altitude, if you just give it a single input, the flight path is just enormously influenced by it. That's why in these small airplanes, over controlling the airplane is just a big issue. So on a big airplane, it's even worse in these speeds. So that we couldn't do it actually. We couldn't hit these towers. Sometimes we could only just partly hit it or not hit it. And these planes just hit these buildings with just 25 feet on both wings, or in total in the middle of the building. So that's just, it's just.
And I know Ole is chomping at the bit to ask you a question, but one last thing on this. If I understand correctly, I want to make sure everybody's hearing what you're saying. The recorded speed that the plane hit the building, according to radar data, was 580 miles per hour, and it was at sea level. It wasn't at altitude. And the official top speed of a 767 at altitude in rarefied air is 533 miles per hour. So you're saying to even simulate it, you have to override the protocols of a flight simulator because it won't even allow you to simulate flight at 580 miles per hour, right?
Yeah, that's correct. That's correct. I mean, these speeds, you have something like the equivalent airspeed. So then you can calculate what the speed actually, that's based on the dynamic pressure on the plane, on the structure. So on higher altitudes, the air is much thinner. So you can then there's less pressure from the air, so you can fly faster. But if you fly with high speeds on lower altitudes, you cannot fly that fast because of structural damage. And the maximum speed at the altitude for a 767 is like 360 knots or something at that altitude on lower levels. So if you fly 520 knots, that's actually supersonic. It's just it's higher actually than Mach 1 on that altitude. So the plane will just disintegrate. And they have a sort of benchmark from Egypt Air 900, I think it was, which crashed in the Atlantic Ocean in 1996 or something like that. And they have the data from that flight, and it disintegrated at 26,000 feet with a speed of I think it was like Mach 1 or 0.95 Mach when it disintegrated, because the dynamic pressure is getting too much. So on the lower levels with 520 knots, the planes just break off. The structural is not made for supersonic flights, these commercial planes. They're just not made for that. They do that in wind tunnels. And based on this, when it disintegrates or when you get structural failure, they determine the maximum speeds of these planes. So if you have a maximum speed of 360 knots, if you fly like 10 knots above that, the shaking vibrations, it's just already enormously. So 100 knots above it, which is outside the flight envelope. So that's impossible. It's like saying, I drove with this, my car, I drove 400 kilometers an hour. It's just technically impossible, simply. Well, there you have a power, it's based on the lack of power. But this is just based on aerodynamics and structure and dynamic pressure. So the flight envelope is just, it says it all. You cannot operate outside the flight envelope. It's just impossible.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like submarines going down with the pressure. If they expect us to believe a submarine could go a mile deep without caving in. It's the same thing you're saying, Dylan, about these planes. It's just not structurally possible.
Yeah, exactly.
Willem, can I ask you, are there any sort of protection of skyscrapers or anything, that warning system that will tell planes back off, you're getting too close? Or is there any kind of things that will make it difficult to hit a building like that if you were aiming for it?
Well, the pilots flew manually, so they had all these warnings, like the ground proximity warning system, which gives all kinds of oral warnings, like terrain, climb up, and you have overspeed. So you're flying with a stick shaker, you're flying with all kinds of rattling sounds, alarm bells. It's just overwhelming circus of oral and visual warnings. But if you fly manually, you can then still operate it, other than an Airbus. An Airbus has the final authority with the plane, with the computer. So that's another philosophy. But Boeing had always, until the 737 MAX, the philosophy that the pilot has the final authority. So if you disconnect the autopilot and the autothrottle, you fly, you're in control. Other than Airbus has logics and in a computer has a final authority in certain flight modes. But that's how this plane in Paris, for instance, at the air show, this Airbus just crashed. It just continued to descend. The pilots tried everything, but they couldn't just disconnect it. That's Airbus logic, and now Boeing as well with the 737 MAX. So you have warnings, but the plane doesn't take it over or anything like that.
Right. Well, we've heard a lot from Field McConnell and Dan Hanley and other pilots about this Boeing uninterruptible autopilot. David Hawkins has spoken about it quite a bit. We're almost out of time here, but we're going to be starting our sponsor exclusive segment on patreon.com/lightonconspiracies, patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth, and subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth. Willem is reconfiguring his website right now, but I do want to remind people who are seeing us perhaps for the first time, you can learn more about Ole and Cody by going to lightonconspiracies.com. Ole is updating the site every day, frequently, actually more than once a day, and people can also purchase books. Ole's written a number of books. Cody has his book about the dark secrets. He's chosen the light, but he's written this book about the dark secrets of the Oklahoma City bombing. We'll be back in just 5 minutes. Ole, any closing statements before we transition over?
No, just that I think it's amazing to get some information from someone who knows what they're talking about. So I'm very grateful that both Cody and Willem are here.
and I certainly won't take offense to the implication that what I was saying last week,
No,
I don't know what I'm talking about, but we'll carry on the conversation in 5 minutes. We'll see everybody over there. Thanks for watching.